We catch up in Opal Town, Coober Pedy, South Australia, famous for its subterranean homes and the filming location for Mad Max Into the Thunderdome. We explored underground living and tried our luck at opal fossicking, after definitely finding some rocks that maybe sparkled a little. As we left, we managed to hit a little rain in a place where it rains only 20 days a year before calling it a night, out in the flats of the wasteland. The next morning, we set off a little like Max with a slight miscalculation of fuel reserves. After exhausting the sub-tank, we clenched our derrieres, we longed out the final hour on the road, making it to the next fuel pump, a whisker over fully drained. Once refueled, we hit the road again and wandered down to the shore of this magnificent salt lake. After a wander around the beach, we head to camp for an early night. With a long day of driving ahead, we started the day under a rainbow, but as we head further south, so did the temperature and weather. So in a cloudy spot out in the red dirt, we cooked up a fire and enjoyed our final night in the red centre. The next morning we arrived in Port Augusta to top up water supplies before heading into the mountains towards the New South Wales border. With cockatoos overhead and plenty of sweet rural train line towns along the way to admire, we eventually called it a night, with moonlight reflecting off the eucalyptus leaves. The next morning we crossed into New South Wales to Broken Hill, a town situated on one of the world's richest deposits of silver, lead and zinc ores. After a quick stop for lunch with a view, we head further into goat-filled pastures and settled in for the night as the cold fog moved in. The next morning we head off east into the fog, and by the time it had cleared, it was actually looking like a rather lovely day, so we called it early at Red Bank Reserve, a lovely free camp just outside of Dubbo on the river absolutely teeming with cockatoos. We spent the afternoon on a short walk along the river with sun and constant squawks before calling it a night. The next morning, with the sun out, giving the solar farm some work to do, passing through quaint wine country towns as we head towards Blue Mountains. As we climbed, the temperature started to drop, and what had started as a sunny day soon became windy and cold. We found a free camp called Blackheath Glen Reserve, lit a fire, sympathised with the hobbits as we enjoyed our Lord of the Rings audiobook. The next morning we went to Echo Point to see the Three Sisters, although the wind had not let up, so rather than suffer through a walk, we decided we'd come back to the Blue Mountains on a sunnier day and head into Sydney. We parked up but soon found ourselves on the Sydney Harbour Bridge heading into the CBD to watch the Wallabies play against Georgia. We found our seats in time for kick-off to enjoy what turned out to be an action-packed game. With sunset over the Alliance, it finished 40-29 to the Wallabies as we headed back home with a fair few happy archers. The next day we met Rolo, and then Coco helped Oscar with some video editing, before we made full use of the ovens now at our disposal and cooked up a full Sunday roast for everyone where we had just enough to fill James. On Monday, we set off to the North Beaches with James and Ellie, starting with the sitcom famous Palm Beach. Our goal for the day was Wales. We looked low and high, but only managed kookaburras, flat seas and a seaplane. After no luck, we decided to head back to the car and head down the coast to hit a couple more of the northern beaches before arriving for lunch with the bush turkeys in Manly before a short walk around the cove to Shelley Beach, where you guessed it, was covered in shells, unsurprisingly. Our final stop and last hope for Wales was North Head, and much to our disbelief, and as if by magic, we were treated to a whale breaching before a whale boat scared them off, so we headed back into the city after a lovely day. The next day, we head into the CBD, starting with the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge, where we looked out into the harbour towards the similarly iconic Opera House, then into the city, complete with the R2-D2 building, a trek around the rocks, and an old harbour district, then onto the Opera House itself. So with lovely views back onto the bridge, we head into the Opera House to try and get some tickets for a show. After that, we head for a walk around the harbour, past the shipyard, around fountains, through the city parks, via the cathedral all the way home, where we glammed up for a night at the opera. This was a really cool experience, and for £15 a ticket, it was a surprisingly affordable night. With a pre-show drink overlooking the harbour bridge all lit up, we had time to finish our drinks before heading in to see Wata, an improvised Aboriginal piece supported by the Sydney Philharmonic Orchestra. After the show, we treated ourselves out to dinner before heading back, full of culture and pasta. The next morning, with the weather looking up, we head out, driving back up to the Blue Mountains. The plan for the day was plenty of walking. We started at the Three Sisters with lovely views into the valley before heading down the never-ending Giant's Stairway. Hugging the cliff face, we made our way down and down and down before reaching the forest in the valley floor, filled with plenty of beautifully cascading waterfalls. However, we had to make it back up to the top somehow, so we began the climb back through the canopy and past the Bridal Veil Falls, which created a mist across the cliff face, and eventually back up to the cliff top, with views back on the forest below, and a clue why they called it the Blue Mountains. Our next stop was the Grand Canyon, which, unlike its American cousin, was a narrow, moss-covered valley filled with running streams and waterfalls. Along the walk, we found a couple of caves to explore and waterfalls to duck between, and we traced the path of the deep river at the base of the canyon. Eventually, the canyon walls gave way to open space, and we took the stepping stones all the way back to the car, driving back to make it home in time for dinner. On Friday, we head into the city again to check out the museums in Sydney, starting with the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which had art galleries filled with pots and paintings, old, new and abstract. Something for everyone, I guess. Next was the Australia Museum, starting with the Nature Photographer of the Year, followed by anthropology exhibits and onto paleontology. Oh, and the Demon Duck of Doom. I don't know what that's meant to be. And a rather graphic T-Rex autopsy. After scares and gore, we decided to take the walk back through the parks via the best street in the city to catch up on the Olympics with Rolo before hitting the town with Sophia for a night out in Cargo to get our dance fix. The next morning we planned to visit the infamous south side of the city, synonymous with surf culture Bondi Beach. First stop, Iceberg's Pool, and true to its name, this was cold. With the strong winds and high waves crashing into the rocks and topping up the pool made for a rather unique length. With trips back and forth to the sauna, the wind began to pick up, and so did the waves, sending swimmers all over the shop. Eventually, the lifeguards closed the pool, which was our cue to head off down to the Bondi Coogee Coastal Walk. We braved the wind and waves and marvelled at the white water unrelenting on the east coast. With swells like this, you can see why surfers flock to this part of the coast. We continued south past various beaches in sheltered coves, harbouring boats and gulls, seeking respite from the waves before making it home to make another roast. The next morning, we head through some of Sydney's secret gardens, small wild oases, complete with the bush turkeys in the shadow of the harbour bridge. As we made our way down to the harbour, once again to Luna Park, where we caught one of Sydney's famous ferries. Our route took us off under the harbour bridge, around the Opera House, and past, X Island? What the fuck is that? But we soon found safety in Manly Bay, where we of course found ourselves a brewery, tasting paddle, good food, and a pint for extra measure. Our final day in Sydney was a visit to Taronga Zoo, in the heart of the city, where we started with a seal show displaying their ability to mimic shape and colour recognition, and impressive athletic ability. After a wave goodbye, the stars retired to their sunny rocks after a show well done, showing off their golden mullets. We head to the flight deck with incredible Sydney backdrop. There were finches of every colour, pigeons with all sorts of hairdos, red and blue-headed parrots, some birds just showing off, and some that were horned modern-day dinosaurs. The bear cages were housing the ferocious red panda, absolutely brutalising the bamboo, followed by a post-breakfast nap, popular choice for both the binturong and the koala. Itchy otters and rodents of unusual size followed the pygmy hippos and Asian elephants. The surreal view of looking down on a giraffe while they're munching away in front of the Opera House is something I could not have guessed I'd ever witness. This zoo really had a crazy collection, with us enjoying moments with a silverback picking seeds one at a time and watching the chimps, with some of them practicing their first swings. Next was the Reptile House, unsurprisingly a good selection of snakes in stock, as well as some of Australia's lizards, including of course the iconic frilled lizard and a stunning lace monitor. I, of course, found a reptile only I could love, as we made our way to a car with a twist, shoved into the side of a tiger enclosure, where we were soon up close and personal with the fluffy end of a tiger, as it made itself comfortable on the bonnet. Then it was time for lunch, in the company of the lemurs, and hang out with the meerkats in the afternoon sun to digest. On to bigger things, bigger ears, that is what we found on our way to the Nocturnal House to see Oscar's favourite Australian critter, the platypus, and she was out to play, swimming all over the tank in search of her new tank mates hiding in the ferns. Hide and seek is a little difficult if your eyes are closed and you can only search with your nose, but she did eventually find a friend to tag before swimming off in search for more. And with that, we headed home. Munch.